events that we have. We have an event on Russian and Eurasian migration policy, which will be on the 12th next week at 3:30. And then we have an event on protecting civil liberties and the rule of law in the age of terrorism on the 17th at 8:45 in the morning. So please join us for those events. Without any further ado, I want to introduce our distinguished speaker this morning. Alexander Danylyuk is Minister of Finance of Ukraine. He was previously deputy head of the presidential administration and represented the president in the cabinet of ministers until April of this year. He previously headed the Coordination Center for Implementation of Economic Reforms in Kyiv from 2010 to 2015 and had various posts in investment agencies, including as vice president of the Avaturs company, is that right, in Kyiv, and CEO of Rurik Investment in London. He speaks 5 languages fluently. I've had a chance to sample his English, which is excellent, maybe in part because he has an MBA from Indiana University, something that our former director and former Congressman Lee Hamilton would certainly have appreciated.
English with a Hoosier accent.
There you go. So I assume you and Mike Pence have had a chance to meet and chat about that, yeah? Before we go to Minister Danylyuk, I want to give the floor for a moment to Ambassador Chali, also a very distinguished expert on international affairs in his former post at the Razumkov Center, and of course now ambassador in Washington. Please.
Thank you, Matt. Good morning, everybody. I'm happy to see that those guys keep a focus on Ukraine. That's the main thing for ambassador, developing a bilateral relation, and especially in this situation with the country. I will not speak a long time. I only want to express my thanks and gratitude for Ghana Institute with the Wilson Center. We spent a lot of time together for not only this year, but also in the previous years. And, you can maybe you saw our exhibition that we have here in this building with Sidorenko, who is really to share the new understanding of Ukraine after communist era. And we have plenty of projects for refugees. And the previous time, I remember I spoke there. I've been very satisfied with audience and Chief of Staff Boris Loshkin. So I believe this day with Minister of Finance and my friend Alexander Danylyuk will be very fruitful for exchange. So thank you for coming and once again that you are still keep focus on Ukraine, because as I mentioned there in this room, in Ukraine and in this part of the world, we have a main events. I think it's from this part of the world, not in North Korea or Syria, depend how the situation in geopolitics will develop on the next decades. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Minister Danylyuk, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. It's a great honor for me to be here and speak in front of you. I actually noticed this exhibition downstairs, and that's a good start of the morning. That in Washington, you see that there is a part of Ukrainian culture, modern Ukrainian culture, which is very important. I believe that we need to. Why it's important to use this opportunity is because we need to. It's very important to tell the Ukrainian story. Yes, we're so much focused within the country in changing Ukraine and implementing reform agenda. But it's very important to keep interest in Ukraine from outside. And when I meet with investors, and I myself from investment community, those people who have very pragmatic interest in countries, right? I feel that this story is not always positive, and that of course frustrates me. There are some grounds for this, but I also believe that a lot of what we do is just not known. So I wanted to talk here about something which I'm sure many people already talked, is about reforms in the country. And I believe I have rights to do that because I devoted a lot of my time, a lot of my chunk of my life to this specific area. It was my choice. I felt the potential of Ukraine. I left Ukraine in 1999 actually to go to study to Indiana to get an MBA there, but I always had the intention to come back and to perform my function, so to say. So I wanted to talk about three things. Just whether Ukraine is going into the right direction, whether we're going in the right speed, and what are the driving forces for Ukrainian reforms. I'll start with the phrase. Thank you. With the phrase of the President Lincoln. He said that I'm a slow walker, but I never walk back. And this is true for Ukraine. Fortunate, unfortunate, this is just reality. It's true for Ukraine. Of course, we want, I want Ukraine to be much faster with reforms, but there are so many factors that actually prevents us with moving full speed. But when there is a risk for us to reverse the trend and go back, there are always blocks on it. And a very tragic example, but is during the Revolution of Dignity, is when actually there was an attempt to reverse. The people came to the street and basically said no. And that was clear from the very beginning that it will be no, right? There will be no reversal. Tragic is because it cost people's life, which is priceless. And I remember discussion after 2005 with a colleague of mine, Sheila Chinkel. She was then advisor to the Prime Minister Yekhanurov. And she was also saying, in 2005 revolution is that maybe because there wasn't actually any loss of life, Ukrainians didn't appreciate, what they achieved during the revolution. Well, we paid such price, and during the Revolution of Dignity and what followed with Russia, we paid very high price. Hopefully, this is not the only factor that drives us forward. It is not. We need to change country. So are we going to the right direction? For sure. And politically, we've chosen European integration vector, and it's basically what we're following. Despite the fact with what's happening in Europe at the moment. I remember I was meeting with my counterpart, Minister of Finance in UK, when we're creating now teams that working with European integrations in each ministry, and they creating similar teams, but for different purposes. Other than that, we have a common positions on pretty much most of the fronts. So this is a very strange time when actually Ukrainians, we want to integrate with Europe, and yet Europe is not united around this fundamental issue. But why we are Euro optimists is because we believe in the future Europe. We understand that Europe does not live its best times in the moment. There are some instability. Well, there is some instability in Ukraine. But we believe in Europe. We believe in what it could become. And that's the Europe that we want to join in some predictable time. Are we going with the right speed? Well, as I said before, we wanted to move much faster, right? I think, and this is true, I'm not selling you the Ukraine, I'm not selling you the government. I'm telling the reality. It's part of my life. It's easier for me to speak. we lost some momentum in 2014. And that is actually the time when we can implement some radical reforms that would have changed the country and wouldn't be accepted by the population. Now it's much more difficult. It's not to say that nothing was done. A lot was done. You know, a lot of things was done for the last 2 years. A lot of positive things. But, you know, for some reforms that I will speak in a minute, the best time was just after the revolution. And I'm talking about some unpopular, but very much needed reforms. You know, starting with pension, starting with gas market reform, land market reform, those things that have to be done in 2014. There was some delay, and now this government has to deal with this. So we have to deal with the most unpopular but yet necessary reforms. And we're dealing with this. So we actually, you know, on tariffs, that was our conscious decision to raise tariffs to the market level. I know it was many times discussed as a heroic act. It's not a heroic act. It's just understanding why we're doing it. And why we're doing it is to create a gas market. You know, I as a minister don't want to talk about the tariffs. I don't want to talk about the investments, state investments in the gas exploration. I think this is something that needs to be dealt by the private sector. So speeding up the gas market reform, making sure that Naftogaz is not the only company, monopoly company, state-owned company, is priority for us, because we believe in markets. Same approach. So it's tariffs. It's not only. It's, you know, for me, raising tariff is not a reform. We see through the very end. The very end is the completed gas market reform, where we have a lot of companies competing with no monopoly, no state monopoly. And that actually would benefit citizens, because instead of arguing about tariffs, you know, competition will raise the prices down. Prices, not the tariffs. And that's what we need. And that's the function of the state that we envisage. We want to be a very effective government, but not doing some functions which is not adamant to, not natural for us. Now, what are the reforms that we doing at the moment? Is gas market is in very active stage. Land market, despite the yesterday's decision of the parliament, which actually came as a surprise, and quite negative surprise for me, I believe that we will push the land market reform, because I do believe in it, government believes in it, president believes in it. That has to be done. Many populists prevent us from doing this, but we understand why we need it, because we need to use our resources properly. The land is our resource. You know? So creating an open competition, normal market, would actually additionally boost the economic growth. Civil service reform, that is also on the shoulders of this government. It started just as we assumed the office. So the whole civil service going through serious reshuffling now, because this is required by the law. Pension reform. It's our international obligation, but also it is Um, it's a pragmatic choice. We just cannot live with current system. I feel obligation. I feel obligation to not to talk, but to do things, and to tell. If we talk, to tell the truth. And the truth is, we cannot guarantee the pension payments to our population unless we do the pension reform. Looking 2 years ahead, I just cannot see it's happening. And if I cannot see it's happening, it's for me, it's a reason to do something, right? And that's why we communicate that pension reform has to be done. Now, I'll move to the role of the Ministry of Finance, which I believe is actually is crucial for the for pushing the reform agenda. And despite the fact that the Ministry of Finance has one of the weakest mandates among other ministries of finance, and this is true. It's not because I'm Minister of Finance. Before that, I was the Deputy Head of Presidential Administration and actually responsible for economy, for economic, financial sector. And I also look at the government as an institution, and I was thinking, what needs to be done in our perfectly stable situation to actually push reform through. And sometimes stability or balance, perfect balance, is also equal to death, right? We need to have some breakthrough, and somebody needs to take leadership for that. And within the government, that's clearly Prime Minister. Again, we're not talking about the President because he's the anchor for all transformations. But within the government, there should be some driving forces. It's a Prime Minister, but there should be a ministry that does it. And usually, the strongest ministry is the Ministry of Finance. Well, in Ukraine, historically, it's not the case. A lot of powers were giving, again, for the balance purposes, to the parliament. And as a result, it's difficult for me to push the agenda because I have to always find a compromise with the parliament on many things. So at that time, I was thinking how to strengthen mandate of the Minister of Finance, and now as a minister, I'll continue doing this. So what do we do? Our main instrument is the budget, and budget is important, but it wasn't taken seriously. It's taken seriously because it wasn't taken seriously because it's actually the model was you have some needs, you pack something together, push to the parliament, and bingo, you have a budget. We chose the approach this year. We said that, okay, you're unlucky. You have Minister of Finance that wants to look ahead for a couple of years, and you will have to think a couple of years ahead as well if you want to get some financing. So we had the discussions with every minister, discussing a very simple question, actually, talking about a very simple question. What do you want to do in the next 3 years? What's on your agenda? What reforms do you want to do? And what will be the impact on the budget? What do you expect from us? What do you actually bring to the budget? It came as a surprise to many because it's something new. It is really something new, because they all first came with, except one, with what they need. But fine. I know what you need. I know you need that twice the amount that we can actually afford to pay you. Actually, what you're planning to do. And I actually enjoy this function because you force people to think differently. And those who are capable of doing this, they immediately switch, and we work as a team. With the Minister of Social Affairs, we have clear vision of what we're going to do together. With the acting minister, she's not appointed yet, for healthcare, within 1 week, we came to a position what reforms will be done within the next 2 years, because we actually want to complete these reforms much faster. And it is built in the budget, right? Same with education, Minister of Education. So we actually starting to use the instruments that had to be used, right? We use it in order to promote, not just promote public reforms, but actually embed it into the system. One of the, and that maybe we'll talk about the civil service reform, but one of the mistakes, I would say, was the attempt in 2014 to build parallel teams. There was a lot of international support offered to the country. We had a lot of advisors. Even some people, a lot of people from civil society, they came as advisors to work, but they didn't want to become a part of civil service. As a result, there was a disconnection between, political leadership, what people want to do, and apparatus that doesn't want to do anything. And if they're not involved, they actually try to impede the progress. So what is important now, and it's crucial now, is to use the civil service reform to actually change the people within the ministries. Because parallel structures, it's a way to nowhere. People are unhappy. In a couple of years, they're tired. They feel like, oh, civil service is not for me. I'm a reformer, right? Some of them leaving, and that actually leaves country without the engine. So it's very important to renew this civil service apparatus, and that's what we're doing in the Ministry of Finance as well. One of the examples is State Fiscal Service. There, I believe, 60%, 70% of people will have to go. They just cannot think in terms of reforms. Just cannot think. Just last week, I put them KPIs. I said, SFS, here are KPIs, how you need to work. That's how I'll assess. And those KPIs, they actually measure what is important for the taxpayers, not only for SFS. It came again as a not surprise, but as a shock for SFS, for everyone pretty much, because they will need to think differently in order to perform. And they will have to reform themselves to meet them, to these KPIs. So changing of apparatus is a big challenge. And without it, if we fail this, we will have a very serious problem that could again create an impediment in going forward. Now let's talk about the driving forces. Civil society, definitely, it's a driving force. They lacking instruments, but yet it's a very strong driving force, and we in our work include them very actively. Just 2 days ago, the government adopted the changes to new tax code. We had 4 months of open process with civil society participating. They didn't have any trust to the State Fiscal Service. They don't believe in the changes, but we actually offered them the opportunity to participate. They trusted us, and actually we had a very good product that would, if adopted by the parliament, it will be a revolutionary change. It will be pretty much no to corruption with SFS if it's implemented, and I'm sure it will be implemented. International partners. Again, definitely they are players, they're helping us. There are different ways we cooperate. Many cynical people say that, you do it because it's an IMF program, right? You do it because it's under loan guarantee conditions, and that's why you do it. If they are not in place, you wouldn't do anything. Well, first of all, it's not true. Partially, of course, it's true, but it's definitely not true for the 100%. And I can tell you that I myself, and this is my actually mission, I believe, is to force people to think after IMF. What will happen in 2 or 3 years? And it's not because we don't need IMF. It's because we actually, when I'm telling you guys that IMF is not with us forever, they're with us for a couple of years. This is their rules. Afterwards, we need to become a fully self-sustainable economy. We need to be responsible for ourselves. We need to have access to the markets. We need to properly function in economy. And so IMF is just to bridge this gap. Help us with reforms, help us with financing. That's it. And that's actually the only way you can communicate that works. Because people are already tired of things that, you know, oh, IMF requires this. People, it can work only for some time. If you see rhetorics changing, we don't saying this anymore. Right? Prime Minister doesn't say it, you know, any government official don't say that it is an IMF program as an explanation why we need to do it. We use different rhetorics. We need to do it. This is our position. And it's not an easy time now. Populists are extremely active. And as you know, we don't have a lack of populists in Ukraine. It's well fed. And it's one of the biggest problems. But to populism, there is only one answer: is knowing what you're doing and explaining why you want to do it. And you have to do it. Your voice needs to be, our voice needs to be 10 times louder, because, as you know, populistic arguments, they're, you know, you need to put 10 times more efforts to actually to balance them. So I know I'm optimistic. Hopefully you are too, and I want you to support us in this journey. It's not easy. It's not easy externally. It's not easy internally either. Some our internal players, they are playing with Russia, and it's absolutely clear. And so it's not an easy environment, and we're doing a lot. We're doing a lot, and we need your support in order for us to go forward. Again, to support our narrative. And it was while doing, because what we're doing now, if we just complete what I just said, by the end of the year, it will be a different country. Because if you were to ask 10 years ago what are the most needed reforms, actually those which we are doing now. They haven't done for many years. So when we do it, it will be a different country. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Very, very substantive, very optimistic on some level, but also realistic. And let me start our discussion here, for which we have, I think, a good amount of time. We've got 15 or 20 minutes, yes? Unless we need to run away. We have time. But I want to ask you this question, just keying off the last thing you said, because you know, the immediate question in my mind when you talked, for example, about reforming the SFS and how basically you're going to have to fire a lot of people, which is a reality, and I get that, is the degree to which not only will there be a kind of abstract political populism in general in response, you will now have a constituency of however many employees, right, who will be kind of the poster children of the victims of reform, just in this one small example, right? You're going to have this, and you're going to have other similar kinds of examples. So it seems like, in addition to the challenge of responding on the rhetorical, political level, being loud and clear and much louder and sort of fighting the media battle and so on the message of reform, you also have this question of how do you maintain stakeholdership on the part of people who otherwise are going to feel alienated or are going to be open to being captured by anti-reform interests you know, who have their own agendas. Like it's a complex problem. It doesn't just come down to a binary equation, right? That there's the people who are pro-reform and the people who are anti-reform, right? There's a population in the middle which can be sort of won over and cultivated and made into stakeholders, but they're going to have to feel they have some stake in it. How do you do that from your vantage point?
Let's just separate this constituency that you were talking about and the rest of population. Constituencies, as far as I understand it, those who lose their positions, right, they will, you know, I remember, I don't know, what was it, 2011 or something. I was in Georgia, and I was talking with Ekas Guladze, maybe even Khatya Dekaniza. It's actually all now working in Ukraine. At that time, Khatya Dekaniza, she was the head of police academy, I believe. And I, at that time, actually asked her, listen, but you fired a lot of policemen. You know, they all have links with mafia, so aren't you afraid that there will be? And I like her answer. She said, listen, actually, we're not afraid because they're cowards, and they've made enough money to, you know, to just say, okay, forget about it, right? But the key thing is they're cowards. Similar situation here, right? It's, you know, the corrupt people, you know, they're also cowards. They have cowards. Yeah, cowards. Sorry, cowards. Cowards. They хуже, no? No, there are no cowards in Khuzhe, in Indiana. That's why it's alien word. So similar situation in SFS. They will. I don't think they will fight back. Once they fire, that's it. You know, I'm not afraid of this. Now, in terms of which is a question much more important, I think that's what you meant, is how to get support of the population for the reforms that they're doing, because some of them are unpopular. Because look, all popular reforms they were done. You know, everybody wants to do a quick wins, right? Something quick and popular. Why not? I also want to do it. Not much left. We have to tackle more systemic problems now. How to do it? I don't know. It's just I think constantly communicating why you want to do it. Constantly. This communication is very, very important. At the moment, if I look at the media, you know, it's on a balance. Of course, there is no like dominant position that we want to do it. Clearly, there is a lot of opposition coming back, but this is the only way. This is the only way, and communicate with people. Every reform and engaging NGOs. For example, for the tax reforms, we engaged all possible NGOs, and they supported us. Even some oppositioners actually supported our reform, because at the end of the day, this is development of the business climate. We all depend on it, right? It's something that we need to learn how to do. Communicate with people, not in populistic language. This is a tough lesson.
Okay, so what we'll do is take a couple of questions, comments together, and then give the minister a chance to respond. We have a microphone here, so please keep your hand high so I can see it. Identify yourself, your institution, and try to end with a question mark. Yeah, okay. Thomas there, then Will.
My name's Thomas Grindley. You mentioned the importance of foreign relations. Have your discussions about joining the European Union revealed any new ideas?
Okay, Will.
Will Pomerantz from the Kennan Institute. You talked about some of the legislative issues that are still in front of you, dealing with land reform and tax reform, and the difficulties that you personally have dealing with the legislature. One of the reasons, the justifications for the change of government was that the new speaker could get legislation through faster. So is there a real logjam now in the legislature? and how do you foresee that impacting reforms going forward?
Okay, and I think we had one more, was it in the back? Right there in the very back? Yeah, and then we'll do another round after.
Thank you very much. Sally Painter from Blue Star Strategies. Mr. Minister, it's great to have you back in the U.S. Thank you for those very eloquent, as always, comments. I would also like to make a comment and then pose a question. I really applaud your efforts and the changes you've been able to make. I think that it's incredibly important to recognize that. There's always more work to do, but you all have done a tremendous job so far. And your comments about the EU are really important. At a time when you have Brexit and people questioning the EU, your desire to get engaged and join is really important, and I think the Europeans need to appreciate that. My question is this. The Cabinet is looking at some changes on how they regulate commodities, and they're looking at minimum pricing in certain commodities. And as we know, this does not conform with EU standards, and if you take one commodity and have a minimum pricing, it could be an escalation to others. So my question is, where do you stand on minimum pricing? Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
First one is very interesting question. Indeed, all of them are very interesting, but this is something that it's more than Minister of Finance, right? It requires to think. Well, joining the EU. I know maybe my reply would be unexpected, but my learning is, although we want to join EU, and this is trend, the more we work, we understand that we as Ukraine need to become stronger. Stronger in all senses. Nobody will defend us in EU, right? It's not a mother that, calls its child. No. A very pragmatic institution. And we need to defend our position. We need to have our vision, what we want to do, what is actually the Europe that we want to join. If we look at the free trade agreement, temporarily, as you know, it was the trade part of it was implemented so that, how to say this, I forgot this even word, but anyway, right, in order to benefit from it. So Europeans, they drop all their kind of limits, right? And in order for us to benefit, we actually had to do our homework. We had to change our legislation in order to benefit from the free trade. We had to do it. Europeans done everything. And guess what? It's moving so slowly. It's because institutionally, we are weak. And now we need to become stronger in order for us to benefit, right? So even with the EU, we need to have a very strong government. We need to defend our interests. We need to understand what we want. That's a key learning. And one of the bitter lessons is in Revolution of Dignity, people came with European flags. They were naive. They actually thought about Europe as a mother, right? But look what's happening. There was still expectation of visa-free regime, not there yet. There are always some preconditions, and people feel actually betrayed. This is also part, and the only answer to this is just get stronger. If you want to be part of Europe, you need to be a solid player. Then you can benefit. Otherwise, you will never join. In terms of the new speaker, I think the logic was not to change the speaker, but the logic was that the the prime minister, the new prime minister, him being as a former speaker, it will be easier for him to work with the parliament. And I think this is true. It is true. After this reshuffle, the coalition became smaller, so it's only two-party coalitions, and it's always good. You know, large coalitions is it's good publicity, but in practice, it's much easier when you have two parties and they bear responsibility, you know, for supporting the government. They form the government, they have to support the our position. So if they don't support, let them change the government. You know, from the responsibility point of view, the smaller coalition is better. So what I can tell you is that I'm as a minister and other ministers, they're working closer with the parliament than the previous government. That was you know, genuine choice, and that was the push and the agenda of the prime minister, because he, you know, he knows what is important for the parliament. Sometimes he tells me something, you know, just go talk to me, talk to him, to them, this and this and this, and I'm just thinking, look, this is counterintuitive, right? Why, you know, it's just, and but I actually take his advice, and when I speak with the parliament, it works. So actually, what he's, you know, he's learning for 1.5 years in the parliament is very, very useful. So here we will, I'm sure we will have a better support, but don't forget what we will offer to the parliament. It's you know, it's not as simple, right? So let's see the results. In terms of commodities, you are specific. I never avoid questions. You specifically referring to the tobacco minimum pricing. Okay, I have an answer for this. When I'm in the US, I was meeting, it just happened so, I've been fined by either Philip Morris finds me here, or Japan Imperial finds me here. Some other finds me companies comes here, or companies that they engage actually to push some things. And Philip Morris saying, oh, listen, we need to impose minimum prices. This is the best practice. Somebody say, oh, no, listen, it's not the right thing to do. It's against, and you advocating for the against minimum pricing. You know, I have a very pragmatic view. At the moment, we didn't change anything. I have a very pragmatic view on this. You know, maybe it's the tobacco market is oligopoly around the world. It's dominated by several companies. And if they think that we as the government of Ukraine will create a special conditions, they're wrong. We will be acting only in the interest of the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian people. That's it. So all these different signals and positions we will make a decision what is important for us, right? I think that we need to increase excises because it directly influences the number of people who smoke. I never smoke in my life, never. So I have no, sorry, I understand that tobacco is a business, but you know, I also see another part of it. People need to smoke less. So leave us to us, please. This policy, this is a sovereign policy of Ukrainian government.
My guess would be that a higher percentage of members of the government today do not smoke versus before 2014. But the longer you spend in these impossible jobs, maybe you will start.
You're right. You know, I'm drinking coffee, you know, there is, where whiskey?
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
You know, you need to, it comes with the job, yes.
We understand. Okay, we'll do one more round of questions. I apologize if I can't get to you. Andrei, go ahead.
Thank you. Andrei Sitov from TASS, the Russian news agency. Thank you to Kennan Institute for hosting the event, and thank you, Minister, for coming over. A very interesting presentation. I think your experience will be studied everywhere. Basically, I have a very factual question about the debt issue. We understand that the Germans have offered their services as intermediaries. Have you received their offer? Have you accepted their offer? Should we expect any talks anytime soon where when and what level do you think such talks may be held? And do you expect a good resolution before the legal proceedings?
Can I, because I didn't know about the rules in this institution, is it off record or not? If it's for the press, I'm not going to comment.
It is. It's on the record. It's
on the record. Okay,
yeah.
fine. So, but on this specific issue, right? I don't want to. I don't want to comment. Right?
Okay.
There is a public position on this, and it will not be changed under in this environment as well.
All right, we're gonna take a couple more questions.
Except that we are, we're in communication with Russia. As you know, it's part of IMF requirement that we need to be in good faith. That's it. And parallel, we are in the court in London, right? So it's all public information. Positions are very clear in our position in London court. That's it. So no new news, please.
Right here.
Hi,
Hands high, I can't see.
Dmitry Preobrazhensky. I don't have an affiliation. Thank you very much for the presentation. I wish you the very best of luck. My question is, to use your framework, in 3 years, what would you like to see your economic relationship with Russia be like?
Okay, and then right here, gentleman in the blue shirt.
Alexander Chaban, Canon Institute. So you said very true thing about reforms, about that Ukraine should become stronger, but probably this will happen not in the nearest future. So during the next several years, Ukraine will still need a lot of international financial assistance. So what is your feeling? Will the United States government, the IMF provide financial assistance to Ukraine during next several years?
Okay. In terms of the relationship with Russia, economic relations, right? It's not measured in years, right? It's measured in the position that Russia takes vis-a-vis Ukraine. If it's within 1 year, the Russian changes its position, right? Stops actions in the east of Ukraine. The reverse position on Crimea, which nobody except Russia, basically relaunching works. We're interested in setting up economic relations. It's beneficial for Russia and for us. But we will never do it at the expense of our sovereign rights, right? So that's, I think, the answer to the questions. In terms of that, the assumption that we will need a lot of financial support, no. We have internal, I feel, actually, not just see, but also feel the potential of Ukraine. And with right reforms in place, we will start, we can leave the IMF program quite soon and start repaying the debt. It's all about reforms. It's unlocking our potential that is currently locked, both in agricultural sector, right, in the overall economy. Mm-hmm. That's it. Actually, I see how it could happen. So when I, plan something, I'm planning within IMF program, right? We have certain parameters there. That's it. That's it. If we can get some additional support, specifically, it could be more tailored for some issues, right? That is very much, that could be very important. We can talk about this. But just say that, globally, Ukraine will stay weak for several years? No way. Yeah, Ukraine is strong. I'm just telling you that this is one of the learnings that we need to get stronger. And we're learning and we're getting stronger. And we're addressing a very important reforms in the country. Not just to put in the book that we've done it, but because those reforms will make us stronger.
I often think to myself that even just employment for the millions who are unemployed right now, if they just had jobs, that group of people alone could pay back the IMF package just themselves within a couple of years. I mean, it's
Yes,
actually
absolutely.
it's not that big compared to Ukraine's
Absolutely.
economic potential.
And,
but-
and don't forget, is the other source. As I said, it's private sector, but going to the markets, capital markets.
Yeah.
You know, it's that. It's also, it's basically in a couple of years a self-sustainable economy that could use all available instruments, right, which is available in the market, and having, you know, and internally economy should develop. That's it. That's our goal, and so this is something which is very realistic to achieve, and this is our plan.
Well, we share that goal with you. Valery, why don't we give you the last word?
If Minister allow me, not the last word, but some short comments, political comments, because Minister deal mostly with finance, economy. For EU joining EU, it was a decision by the parliament, by the government, and it is not only about economy. So my position, if it's only about economy and development, regulation, it's not enough for such a strategic decision for the country. And now we have a real changes of perception by Ukrainians. That one example, gas market. One of the outcome of our decision be closer to EU and choose this way of development, Minister mentioned about the success in gas market reform. So many things that help us a lot, but we should be pragmatic, but in the same time we should understand Ukraine will never be a buffer zone between European Union and Russia, so it's not the right choice. And we must belong to the European family, not only culturally, geographically and politically, but also economically and social standards. We understand it's a long way. We do not know what will be with EU, but what we should know and what our people know definitely is we are make a final decision. Because in the previous year, it was two choices, Russia and integration with Eurasian structure and European structures. Now it's only one decision because of Russia.
And
it's very
made,
simple.
And it's made this decision.
And it's very connected with another question about economic cooperation with our neighbors. It would be a stupid answer if anybody say no cooperation with neighbors for the future, economic cooperation. But what's the problem we faced, not now, not after the illegal occupation of the part of Ukrainian territory or annexation and everything that shock us, frankly, shock us, everybody in the country. But I remember from 2013, with the previous president, with the previous regime, it's very cooperated with Russia, by the way, and now under the prosecutor, our former president. Even at that time, it was Russia who banned trade exports, Ukrainian exports to Russia, not Ukraine. And that's a problem. This is very connected with geopolitical issues, and unfortunately we can't consider that like separate things, economy, foreign policy, or defense. And finally, unfortunately we receive bad news every day. And I want to mention this figures. We name it figures, but up to 10,000 people killed. 10,000, can you imagine? So when we speak, and I'm participating in many discussions about opportunities for the future, one question, how to make economy deals and cooperate when you have open border, 400 kilometers, not control, not withdrawn weapons from the territory of Ukraine, not exchange the hostages. So that's a responsibility by Russia, very simple. And that's a case when we, in any discussion, we need now not forget that Ukraine now under aggression, and we are also count of support of international community. We have a strong, confirmed support of that. And I believe one day we will resolve this geopolitical problem. And after that, I believe we will have a discussion, not only about today's issues, but the great opportunities for the future. And thank you very much for organizing this event. I think it's very fruitful. I benefit to hear this question, and it's food for thought for our next meetings. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Chali. It's not the first time that you've spoken here, and we're grateful for that. Minister Danylyuk, that was really very enlightening, inspiring. Of course, you and I are not the only ones who recognize that inspiring words are one thing and deeds are another thing, and that's the challenge that will measure your success. And we all wish you well. And I just want to remind everyone that as difficult as some of the issues are that we addressed here, this is our job. We were chartered by the United States Congress to create this platform on Pennsylvania Avenue between the White House and the Congress, and this is what we do. So thank you for being here with us, and thank you all.
Thank you.
А можно на другую тему? Про газ. Извиняюсь, просит редакция спросить.